Welcome to Vendetta Sports Media. It is the 17th of April, and it's the Daily Show. James Herrick here. Griffin, how we doing?
I'm doing good today, James. How about you?
Not bad at all. So this morning, news broke. First topic on the docket to discuss: Jalen Hurts' new contract extension. You wrote the post for this on the site, so I'll let you start off.
Yep. So Hurts just got his bag, well deserved after kind of a breakout year, MVP candidate season, led the Eagles to around 14, 15 wins, a Super Bowl appearance. So he deserved it. He got a 5-year, $255 million contract, along with a no trade clause and around $179 million guaranteed. Not sure if that's the exact number, but around that area. And I mean, I think he just deserves it. So
Mhm.
he's been a very good player last season. So, I mean, he's the highest paid player in NFL history. So there's not much to say other than that. So Hurts got a bag. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and I will say it's not. It's I guess it's not really. It is newsworthy that he's like the highest paid player of all time. But I feel like that changes every time a new quarterback resets the market. I'm
Yep.
sure Burrow will eventually break that. So, but this was a good contract on his part, and I'm glad they got this worked out. Right. I'm
Mhm.
glad this is done. I'm glad this is out of the way. I'm glad it's settled, and I think good contract. Right. Obviously, owners are very hesitant to give that fully guaranteed money, but I think both sides got a good deal here. 255 for a max, I think, is a fair number for Jalen Hurts, and I think 179, 180 range being the guaranteed number. I feel like
Mhm.
that's a really good guarantee. Um, and I wonder how that's going to affect the quarterback market because obviously the last quarterback to sign was Deshaun Watson, and he got that fully guaranteed contract that really I don't want to. I don't know if it messed with the market per se, but it was a big concern in the market, and it feels like this is kind of coming back to earth. We finally had a quarterback sign for a non-fully guaranteed, large portion of it guaranteed though, so it's not
Mhm.
like he's playing on a non-guaranteed contract at all, but a good chunk of guaranteed money. So I'm interested to see how that will affect some guys in the future, whether that be Lamar, whether that be Burrow. It'll probably end up being Burrow who it affects more.
Mhm.
That it's not fully guaranteed.
Yeah. I think I mean, like you said, I think the Watson kind of situation really kind of amped up the market. It was already going to increase, and now that they had that, and now the whole Lamar situation, I'm interested to see how that affects not only Lamar but the Eagles itself. Like we've seen a lot. I think we've talked about it too. Just like in the playoffs, especially, you can't have like a Super Bowl winning team when your quarterback is paid that much money because obviously that's going to affect the rest of the team.
Mhm.
But the Eagles are kind of mixed in a young and kind of old era with like Brandon Graham and all those guys are getting up there. They're looking for new contracts. So, I mean, if the Eagles can keep up with get that kind of core staying the same while retaining their young guys and kind of keeping them low on contracts, I think they'll still be able to obviously compete in the NFC East and let alone the whole NFC itself.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. And I think the Eagles are probably in a better position for a couple of reasons than other teams. And it's because they have a good O line and they can run the ball well,
Hmm.
first of all. But they also do a good job drafting young guys and kind of having a plan in place for when guys, need a new contract and then they can make the decision, or do we give this guy the money or do we lean on the young guy we drafted?
Hmm.
For example, Jordan Davis, who they got in the first round last year, is a guy who can step in and play a little bit more this year, depending on who they lose. They already lost Hargraves. And then, this year they have 2 first-round picks. Maybe they draft a corner to step in for a big name player like Slay or Bradbury once they want a new contract, even though they just resigned, but a couple years down the line. So guys like that, the O line too, they're doing a good job of getting in young talent in there to kind of replace some of the older guys. So they draft well, and I think they have a good system going of getting new talent in when it's time. So I think that kind of eases some of their problems in terms of cap situation.
Hmm.
But also, I like this for the Eagles because I think that Hertz is a type of guy that you can. I feel like I trust giving Hertz money, right?
Yeah.
The thing that I like the most about Jalen Hurts is that he's always been the hardest working guy out there, right? He's always been hardworking, and he's always really worked so hard to improve. Um, uh, Trey chiming in here. We can get to Lamar in a second. But yeah, Hurts, I think, is a great guy to give an extension to, where he's going to continue to work hard. He's going to continue to get better as a player, and I think that's probably my favorite thing about Hurts and giving him that money. I don't think that'll affect him.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Hertz is honestly just like a good dude. I think he's one just like he's a humble guy, and ever since like he transferred from Bama to Oklahoma, and he's been that guy, and he's always had a chip on his
Mhm.
shoulder. And I feel like you gotta have to give those guys the money. Like, and at the end of the day, Hertz is always for the team. He said that a lot last year. So if kind of tough times come with the salary cap, I'm sure he'll be able to reduce it back a little, get some separation for the team, and they'll be good.
Yep, yep. And then in terms of Lamar, you brought this up a little bit, but I imagine this will affect Lamar because I feel like it, if 180 guaranteed is the number that Hertz is getting, there were rumors about Lamar and what he wanted. I don't see a team really giving him more than that 180 guaranteed number. Maybe a team's willing to give him more on the total, but it seems like the guaranteed money is the number that's always been, you know, getting tossed around. But in terms of guaranteed money, I have a hard time seeing him get more than that 180 that Hertz got for the reasons that we kind of discussed with Hertz and why he deserved that.
Yeah. And I remember I wrote a post like back when kind of Lamar was in the contract feud, and obviously he still is, but he was wanting more money than Deshaun Watson or guaranteed money. And that's kind of the number, like you said, that's been kind of being thrown around. And Lamar wants the guaranteed money because obviously he's been injury prone throughout his years. And like, who knows how long he can last being kind of a run heavy quarterback. And like Trey said, Lamar's being screwed over when he kind of is in a sense, but I mean, he's been talking a lot of shit, so I wouldn't mind him seeing like getting kind of a loose end and not getting the money he wants because he's been kind of bitching about it. So yeah.
Yeah, I don't like listening to people complain. That's typically one thing that really just I don't like complaining. It happens all
Mhm.
the time. People love to complain. Lamar's been complaining a lot. Not really a fan of it. But with Lamar, right? It's if it's collusion, it's because no one wants to give him a fully guaranteed contract. And I don't necessarily think that is a Lamar thing. I think that's owners putting their foot down and saying, we don't want to give out a fully guaranteed contract.
Mhm.
And Hertz didn't get a fully guaranteed contract either. He was just willing to sign the non fully guaranteed contract.
Yeah.
So, the difference is Lamar's not willing to sign the extension that doesn't pay him the fully guaranteed. And maybe at this point he is, who knows? But at the time when they were deep in their contract discussions, before he was out on the open market, um, before he was out on the open market, he when they were in those discussions, he was probably asking for the fully guaranteed. And Trey was being sarcastic.
Mhm.
And as anyone that does not for anyone that does not listen to or follow Vendetta closely, Trey, not a big Lamar fan. And it's understandable because, the situation has been a mess for a long period of time over in Baltimore. And, he hasn't really led them to any serious playoff success. And then that kind of leaves you to discuss whether you want a quarterback like Lamar leading your team, which is a whole nother can of worms in itself, which
Mhm.
probably not the best idea. But
Yeah.
and we'll close the quarterback discussion there because we can talk all day about Lamar. And Griffin, you and I have, I think, discussed Lamar on two or three different
Yep.
occasions. It always finds a way to rear its ugly head and kind of ruin any positive discussion that
Yeah.
that we have. Um, but
Exactly.
but the other big news that's really happened, it was more this weekend, but NBA playoffs. And the NBA playoffs, we got game ones done across the board, and we'll start with the more heated point of discussion for several reasons. Clippers Suns. So Clippers Suns was probably the most talked about game out of all the Western Conference games. We'll start with the West, work our way back over to the East. But as far as the Clippers and Suns game, Clippers really really nice win. We're able to steal game one.
Mhm.
As a road team, it's always nice to get a win on the road, get that early, and kind of picked up a little bit of momentum right away.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like just at the beginning of the game, the Clippers really they seemed like the better team. Obviously, they came out with like a huge lead after the first quarter was 30-18. So
Mhm.
they came out hot. Phoenix started to come back. Um, Trey just said if Josh Hart gets those Westbrook minutes, they win by 15. I mean, I don't know for the Knicks, but with the Clippers, Kawhi obviously played great. I feel like 38 points, 5 rebounds, 5 assists, and he shot very well. 1 steal, 1 block, 3 turnovers. So Kawhi kind of put the Clippers on their back. I know Trey doesn't like Westbrook. He was good on the defensive end. He had a few blocks, but obviously he's kind of struggling with shooting. He went 3 for 19 and 1 for 6. So he wasn't too much on the offensive end. But the Clippers obviously are kind of like a more well-rounded team. Obviously they have Paul George out, but they had some guys step up. Eric Gordon played well. Zubac played well, and Plumlee off the bench played really well. So I think Clippers kind of took this one, but if without Paul George too. So yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and I guess I'll start with Westbrook. I'm not, I'm not really a Westbrook hater, but I also don't love the guy. And as Trey said, almost shot him out of the game. And my concern with Westbrook is the same as Trey's, where simply, you have to know your role on the offensive end of the court, right? There were times where he simply shot too much, right? You're going 3 for 16. Once you're that cold, you can't keep shooting.
Yeah.
But I also think what he added defensively and rebounding was a high value, right?
Mhm.
And there's other players that are obviously better than Westbrook at this stage in his career, right? There's guys who could play better, or play the same defensively, rebound like he did, but also shoot better on the offensive end of the court. But, I still have to say that he added value on the defensive end, but you also cannot shoot
Mhm.
3 for 16 in a playoff game and consistently win with that happening. So I do think, he probably needs to shoot less. And, Trey, as Trey said, there's other role players that could shoot better, and still play that level of defense. But with what Russell Westbrook is right now, and they basically got him for free as well. If he can find his role and kind of come into his role a little bit better, shoot less, and continue that effort defensively, I think he can do some good things for that team. And if they can get out of this series and get Paul George back, that Clippers team could be a problem. I've liked
Mhm.
that Clippers team just because of Kawhi. I think Kawhi is one of the least talked about superstars at this point in his career. A couple years ago, he was obviously a lot more discussed. But where Kawhi is at right now, he gets overshadowed by some of the bigger names. Giannis, Embiid, Jokic, and he might not be as good as those guys right now, but he is a player that you want on your team come playoff time, and he proved it last night.
Yep, I completely agree. And I know Trey's gonna give me a little bit of shit for this, but I'm not like I've never been a Westbrook hater. Obviously, he wasn't good on the Lakers, but like you said before, you got to know your role on the team. And I know I'm kind of edging him out a little bit, but Westbrook didn't do that last night. But I do think I forgot who had the take a few days ago, but I wasn't on Slack, but someone sent it, and they said Chris Paul or Westbrook has a better career than Chris Paul all time. And I know Trey's going to give me so much shit for it, but I might have to agree with that. I know Westbrook hasn't been like as good defensively as Chris Paul in his just like time in the league, but Westbrook has done more in the playoffs, even though they both haven't won a chip, and like he has an MVP over Chris Paul, and Chris Paul frankly doesn't have anything else. So
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out who said. I want to say it was Chickster, but I can't find the exact person who said it. Anyways, I we'll say it wasn't Chickster. I thought it was, but I can't find that exact message, so I won't put that on him, since I don't know for sure. But that's tough because he does have the MVP. The thing the I'll probably Chris Paul's longevity, I think, is very valuable,
yeah,
and Chris Paul has led a lot of. He's been one of the better players on a lot of really good teams. I probably take Chris Paul. Um, the individual award for Russ, I think, is good, but I think Chris Paul just had more longevity in his career. That's what really leads me to take Chris Paul. And in terms of pure talent, I think he's more well-rounded, and so I'd take Chris Paul. Prime Chris Paul, prime Russ. I'm probably taking Chris Paul. You know, if you're putting prime against prime, and you make me pick one player to lead me to a championship, I think I've got to go Chris Paul. And I'm not, I'm also not a Russell Westbrook hater. I'm not as low as Russell Westbrook is. Some people, I think he was a good player in his prime, but I'm not going to, take him over Chris Paul when it comes down to it.
Yeah, I probably didn't word that as I meant it to. I think Chris Paul is like the better player all time, but I think at his peak, like his MVP season, I think Westbrook was better than Chris Paul's peak. But obviously, I think Chris Paul is the better player all time. So
Okay.
I wanted to clear that up.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. Chris Paul also has started to play a little bit better for the Suns as well. There were some times last year, sometimes this year, where he wasn't playing well at all. But Chris Paul is another player that has, found his role. He hasn't had to do as much offensively with Durant on the court, and he's really started to play a lot better. Trey chiming in, much more efficient, much better shooter. Doesn't turn the ball over as much. Defense, passing, yeah, all true. And the only problem is with Chris Paul is I wish Chris Paul would have won something, because Chris Paul, I feel like, doesn't get the credit he deserves because he never won anything, serious. And with that being said, you can always say he wasn't always on the best teams, but I do wish he would have at least made it to a finals, been a little bit more successful in the playoffs. I do think that hurts his overall legacy when you look back. But yeah. But Chris Paul has played much better. He declined a lot in the last couple of years, but this, the last couple of weeks or so, I think he's found his role and has been a lot better for the Suns. So I think Chris Paul if he can kind of keep up what he's been doing, I think the Suns may be able to kind of rebound a little bit. All right, all-time point. We'll go here. All-time point guards. Curry, Magic, Stockton, CP3, Isaiah Thomas. Westbrook doesn't crack the top 600. I'll disagree with that part. Also, I'll hear your thoughts on this too, Griffin. But I'm probably putting Isaiah Thomas above CP3. That may be me being a Detroit homer, but he did lead them. He was the best player on the team that won back-to-back rings. So I value that, him being the best player on a team that won back-to-back rings. So I'd put Isaiah Thomas over CP3, but I don't hate the list.
Yeah, I think it goes Curry, Magic, Stockton. Like you said, I'm not a big like Isaiah Thomas or Chris Paul guy, but I think just because of the championships, I got to put IT over CP3. But Trey, you're wrong. Westbrook does crack the top 600. I think Trey could crack the top 600 in NBA point guards of all time. But I know it's hard to I know it's so easy to hate on Westbrook, but I loved his MVP season, and I feel like you can't take that away from him. I think Chris Paul's better all time, but Westbrook at his MVP season was better than Chris Paul's best season.
Yep. Yeah. I'll take that. I do think, Westbrook does deserve credit for the peak he had was short, but when he was at his peak, I think he did some positive things. Moving on, let's move over to Lakers Grizzlies. Great first game for the Lakers. And in the sense that what I was most impressed about was that it wasn't just LeBron, right? LeBron didn't will them to this win. Obviously, he played well. It's not that he played bad. Trey chiming in again. I do get the argument, but he added a lot of value to that team, and I see the point of saying nobody should get it on a 6 seed, because if you were the most valuable player, you can probably get them to higher to the 6 seed. But Lakers game, I was impressed with the bench, right? Austin Reeves played really well. Hachimura played really well. Hachimura, great move at the deadline to get him, and it paid off last night. So I was really impressed with the Lakers and by the fact that they kind of had some role players step up and play really well. And it wasn't just LeBron just absolutely willing them to a game one win. It was other players stepping up and joining in on the party and helping them win this first game. And once again, another team picking up a road win, obviously in the playoffs, like we mentioned earlier, very, very monumental. And I think in comparison to Clippers versus Suns, I think the Lakers probably have a lot higher of a potential to win the series and kind of
Mhm.
continue this hot streak that they started in game one.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, like you said before, and like we saw just with the whole Lakers just situation at the trade deadline. I mean, they were not looking good at all. They looked like they were in the outside looking in, won the play in, and now they're here. So
Mm-hmm.
congratulate on the Lakers, even though it is one win, obviously, but from where they came at the beginning of the season, like I think it's a very big accomplishment. Obviously, LeBron not doing a whole lot, or just like not doing everything, I should say. 21, 11, and 5 shot pretty well. And then AD too, similar stat line. Austin Reeves, obviously, he's been very good all season, and he's going to get paid soon. So
Mm-hmm.
Austin Reeves has that dog in him. D'Lo played well. Rui Hachimura played well, and Dennis Schroeder came off the bench and played decent. So I mean, that Lakers team has depth, something that the Suns and even the Cavs now just I feel like don't have. The Cavs saw that they really need depth in the Knicks series too, and Seti Osman is not good at all. So I just want to point that out. I know Trey said that, and I agreed with him heavily. But Lakers looked very good. I feel like without Ja, they're playing better without him. But I mean, having AD guard Jaren Jackson Jr. and kind of locking him up, and I feel like the Lakers depth is just too much for this series. And I think Lakers could win possibly in 5 or 6 games.
Mm-hmm. And Trey tossed in here. Grizzlies are dead. I wouldn't say they're dead, but they are not in good shape. And I do think the Lakers turnaround has more to do with kind of a complete reworking of the team and less to do with getting rid of just Westbrook. If Westbrook was the only piece that they removed, then I'd agree with that. But they reworked that bench completely, added a lot of really good players. It was multiple moves. I don't think it was just getting rid of Westbrook.
Mhm.
And credit to what the Lakers did at the deadline. It worked well for them throughout the second half of the season. And it's also important to note that they kind of got themselves into the situation where they had to go out there and make all those moves. It was their own mistakes that led them to having to save themselves. So while they should get credit for kind of improving that roster at the deadline, they were the ones who also destroyed that roster.
Yeah.
Um, and the Russell Westbrook trade was very bad too, giving up the picks for him, kind of hurt their flexibility to make some more moves. So the Westbrook trade really did not help that at all. But overall, I agree with you. And it's going to be interesting to see what Ja's health looks like as the remainder of this series goes on. Because if they don't have Ja, I don't really think they stand much of a chance. I just pulled up his status, and it's in quote in jeopardy
Mhm.
after his injury. And even though the thing with Ja has always, missed games, and it's always been that the Grizzlies can win games without him. I think that's true in the regular season. I think when you get in playoff time and you're playing the Lakers and you're playing LeBron, you that doesn't hold true. So
Yeah.
if Ja's out there, they're in bad shape. If AD's out, I think the Lakers can still win the series,
Mhm.
but I think that hurts their overall championship potential.
Yeah. I think the biggest factor is obviously like if AD and Ja are injured, I think it hurts the Grizzlies less than it hurts the Lakers with Ja being out than AD. Obviously, just because
Hmm.
who's going to guard Triple J? I think LeBron can't do it. I know Jaren's been like so good defensively, but that's going to be a keen matchup to tune into if obviously AD's hurt. But I mean, Ja Morant, like, I feel like we just got to talk about he can't be doing all these flashy dunks. He's such a young player. And why are you trying to dunk on Anthony Davis? He's like 6'10", and you're just not gonna do it. And he injures himself doing that. And we see like him with like dunking on Kevin Love or these other guys. Like he's gonna get a career-ending injury. He's gonna be the next Derrick Rose. And like I know it's like kind of a stretch, but I mean we were comparing him to Derrick Rose at the even at the like the draft too. and it's kind of turning out to be like looking like a new story like that.
Yeah, and Ja, I think this is something that every player has to go through when you have the explosiveness of someone like Ja Morant is when do you use it and when are you being reckless?
Hmm.
You can't be reckless with it, but you do need to use it because that's what makes him so effective. So there's a balance there. And Ja, for the level that he's gotten to, right? Great player, great player. Um, but there's a point where you get a little bit more mature and you understand your game a little bit more and when to really, go for that and when you need to kind of reel in the aggressiveness, reel in the recklessness, and kind of control yourself a little bit more.
Hmm.
I agree with you. I don't think he's found that balance yet because, like you said, he got hurt and I hate blaming players after they get hurt, but sometimes, if you're being too reckless, that's a risk you run, and I think that hit him there, and I hope he comes back because I think Ja is an exciting player to watch, and I don't really like seeing players hurt during the playoffs because then you always have to deal with people being like, oh, so and so got hurt, so
Hmm.
this ring doesn't matter, or this series would have went differently. I
Yeah.
hate the ifs and buts that go around that go with injuries even worse. So I hope he comes back. But I do agree with your point where you got to reel it in a little bit more. You're being a little bit too reckless. Reel it in and just get the win.
Yeah, I agree.
West Conference. We'll swing it over to the Warriors Kings. It's a close game. I didn't get to watch much of this game, so I'll let you do the heavy lifting. But I really did think the Kings were in a good position to win this game, just because of the fact that they were at home in the
Hmm.
playoffs for the first time since the early 2000s. I can only imagine the vibe there that they had going. That was going to be a tough game for the Warriors to win. They do have to win a road game eventually, but I
Hmm.
think game one is probably the one that is the hardest to pull off.
Yeah. I mean, the clip that I saw that kind of shocked me the most was just like the Sacramento arena being packed, like right
Hmm.
before the game. All the Kings fans. I thought it was really cool. Trey says, "Light the beam," and I completely agree with him. I love the Kings this year. I loved them ever since last year when they went on that kind of run. But Trey says, "The Kings owe me a care package for being the only person in sports media to believe in them from the jump." So I love that take, Trey. I mean, but they might as well. Trey's kind of the Chinese farmer, as we say. But I mean, I feel like we got to shout out De'Aaron Fox. He played an incredible
Hmm.
game, 38 points. He played so well, even defensively too. But uh, I mean, I feel like the Warriors have to be in trouble now. And I know it's kind of a long stretch, but if Malik Monk can play as well as he did the first game and he can continue that, I figured I didn't take the post, but I felt like he was going to have to be their X factor for the playoffs. He's been very good this season and very good at stepping up. Davion Mitchell kind of contributed a little bit, but he didn't play too much. Obviously, he's very good defensively. He's kind of going to be the Matthew Dellavedova to on Stephen Curry in like the 2016 finals, which I see him. But Sabonis didn't play the greatest. He didn't shoot particularly too well. And against like Draymond Green, I feel like that's kind of the struggle where the Kings need him to shoot well. I know Draymond is still a good defender, but I feel like the Warriors kind of lucked out with only losing by 3 points, and Sabonis didn't play as well as he should. But Keegan Murray didn't play that well, didn't shoot as well as they hoped. Obviously, he's going to be a huge role player for them. Harrison Barnes did his work 13, 7, and 2, 5 for 11. So Kings played very well. And then moving on to the Warriors, Curry obviously played well 36 and 2, shot very well from the field. Um, but other than that, I feel like just it was a very close game, came down the wire, and Curry's potentially game tying shot almost went in, but was a little off. But very good game, and we're on to the next one. So light the beam.
Yeah, and the thing that I love about the Kings, I think is going to help them a lot in the playoffs, is they have so many guys that can get hot. They just need one or two to get hot. it was Malik Monk against in game one. Kevin Herter will have a game eventually. You know, it might be the next game, might be game 6. Who knows when it'll be? But Herter will have a game eventually where he goes off too. You know, Keegan Murray may have a game where he gets hot, right? They have so many players that can get hot and start hitting the threes that makes them a really tough team to beat. And it's the role players, right? It's not just, oh, De'Aaron Fox has to go off, right? They can get a guy like Malik Monk to go off, or they can get a guy like Herter to go off. And I think that's very valuable come playoff time where you have multiple hands and you just got to figure out which one is hot. And it makes them a tough team to beat. And Trey said, peep where Trey ranked them. Trey, you're gonna have to say it because I don't know where you had them ranked, to be honest with you. I don't know where you had them ranked, so you'll have to drop it in there. But the Kings team was very good, and I know Trey has been high on that Kings team all year. And I think this is going to be a close and competitive series. If they were playing a different team, I'd be a little bit more bullish on the Kings, but it's still the Warriors, a team with a lot of playoff experience. It's still Steph Curry, but I do have areas for concern come for the I do have areas of concern for the Warriors simply because guys like Draymond are a little bit older. You know, you have to rely a little bit more on Poole, who, when Poole is playing really well, he's a great player to have. And it's someone that you can kind of rely on to kind of go off. Someone who, you know, Poole last year, he in the playoffs, he kind of helped them a lot. But when he gets cold, he gets very, very cold.
Mhm.
So the Warriors are vulnerable, but I do still like them overall.
I'm looking where Trey ranked them as the 20th best team coming into the season. So behind teams like the Knicks, Lakers, Bulls, Hawks.
Trey had him at 15.
15?
Yeah. They were 20 in the overall comp.
Okay.
Because he sent us the October one.
Yeah, okay. Oh, yeah, 15. That was the average.
And yeah, 20 was 20 and yeah. Okay. All right. Sorry. I'm jumping around tabs here trying to get where Trey had them ranked. But yeah, Kings, Trey has always been high on the Kings, and he was high on the Herter move. I remember that when they added him this offseason too. So, all right. Last game in the West, which I don't think is really one of a lot of discussion. Nuggets, Timberwolves. Nuggets win by 29. I do think this becomes a series. I don't really. I think this will be. I don't know if it'll be a sweep. Maybe the Timberwolves can squeak one game out, but I think the Nuggets are going to get it done pretty easily here in the first round.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the one thing that I kind of think about this series is people forgot how dangerous a healthy Nuggets team is, and they just played with the Timberwolves so much. I mean, held them to 80 points, and they killed them. So, as a Minnesota fan, I mean, I don't like the Timberwolves, but obviously, like, I'm from Minnesota, but it's kind of sad to see us being in the dumpster fire. I hated the Rudy Gobert trade, and it's just given me fuel to the fire to hate that man even more. So.
Yep. I also hated the Lakers as the 8 seed versus the Nuggets would have been a very, very interesting matchup. And that Gobert trade was awful. I remember, I think I went on the NBA pod with Jackson after they made that trade, and they just simply gave up too much for him. You don't leverage your future for Rudy Gobert, and that's what they did. Gave up way too much, and they're not really in a great position to really do much of anything this year. And it'll be interesting to see the Nuggets when they get out of this round. I'm interested to see what they look like in the second round and down the stretch, because I think there will be some very interesting matchups for them. But I don't necessarily think that this is the one that's gonna get them.
Yeah, I agree.
And they'll have the winner of Suns Clippers. So that's an interesting matchup, regardless of who wins that series. I think that'll be an interesting series either way. Suns probably a little bit more interesting, but Clippers I think could do some things. Now, moving over to the East, and in the East, I'll let you pick the game we start off with since I've been throwing them out. So you go ahead and start us off with the East.
I feel like we got to start with the closest game and the Knicks versus the Cavaliers. As I said before, I think there's kind of some concerns with the Cavs bench. Cedi Osman, as said before, and I know Trey said this, but I'm all on board with it. He's awful. He's hot garbage. I think if you put Trey in a Cavaliers uniform, put him with Cedi Osman's minutes, he might do as good as him. I mean, he looked useless out there. Like, I'm sorry. He just looked so bad. And I know he shot like decently well, but bro took 4 shots and he's just not good. I'm sorry. Like, but the one thing that I don't get is why did Darius Garland shoot 2 shots in the second half or close to it? I mean, why?
I I get that you have Donovan Mitchell, right? Donovan Mitchell should be your number one offensive option, but Darius Garland is a very, very good player, and that's a great backcourt. And I agree, you have to absolutely, yeah. Now, I will say, 5'8" and the ability to collect fouls can come in handy. That is an underrated skills to have. Um, but you have to find that balance there. And Garland, I think you're right. He does have to shoot more than 2 times down the stretch. And I think this series will probably be the best first round series in terms of competitiveness. Makes sense. It's the 4 versus 5, so they should play closer. But I think we're going to get a lot of competitive games here. I'm interested to see how this one turns out. I like this Cavs team. I like Donovan Mitchell. I like Mobley. I like a lot of the players that they have, a lot of pieces they have. But the Knicks did look like the better team in game 1. Julius Randle, it's crazy how he can go from being an absolutely terrible player to figuring things out and then going back to being an absolutely terrible player. If he can manage to play at his peak level or peak form for this series, I think they're in a good spot. And Jalen Brunson has been outstanding for months now, this whole season. So it'll be an interesting series. But I agree with you in the sense that, the Knicks looked very good in game 1.
Yep. So moving on, we have the other. It's going to happen Tuesday. So it's Hawks and Boston. As a Celtics fan, I feel like this is going to be a 5-game series. I feel like the Hawks are just going to catch up on a Celtics hiccup and take a game from them. But, I mean, that first half was ugly for the Hawks. Down by 30. Tatum looked so good. JB looked very good. And Robert Williams, rest him for the Bucks or the Heat. Who knows now with Giannis being out. But they looked very good. I mean, Trae Young he's been so off and on this entire year. And he kind of shot the Hawks out of the gym. I mean, 5 for 18. Dare I say that's Westbrook numbers, but that's kind of like Westbrook numbers right now.
It was bad. It was very bad.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd like to get more out of, I guess I shouldn't say more, but when Trae Young's having a bad game, it's like there's other pieces there, but we don't have to keep piling on. You have guys like DeJounte Murray. He had a nice game, but it's like maybe you try and lean on him a little more. Maybe you try and get a little bit more out of Sadiq Bey. It's like maybe there's some other things that you can do. But that's also, the Celtics are also a good defensive team. So I guess it's much easier said than done. But I'm with you. 5 games at most. I could see a sweep here. But 5 games at most. And, that's probably with the way the East is kind of formatted, right? These, 7 and 8 seeds are not good. But, as you mentioned, that Heat Bucks series got a lot more interesting just because of injuries, basically.
Yeah. And even I feel like that's a kind of a good transition point to move on to that Heat Bucks series. Tyler Hero, broken right hand after diving for a ball. He's going to be out for the playoffs and up until start of next season, if not a little bit delayed. And injuries, I feel like that's been kind of the biggest thing. AD, Ja Morant, Hero, and now Giannis too. So Bucks lose their star player. Who knows if he's going to be out for game 2? I'm not
Hmm.
100% sure what the report is for that, but he's kind of I think I'm looking at it right now. He's a game time decision. But do you think it'd be smart to rest Giannis for one game and potentially cause another injury or not?
I don't know if you should rest him. If
Mm,
he can't go, he can't go. But as far as rest goes, it's tough because they lost the first game. If they win the first game, we're having a different discussion. I don't
mhm.
like the prospect of being down 2-0.
Yeah.
That's something that I really, really don't like. Um, so I would probably say no. If he can go, I think you have to play him. But I do think there's a discussion that should be had. I'm not saying it's a terrible idea to sit him, but I don't like the idea of going down 2-0. That said, like you said, Hero, big piece of that Heat team. Obviously, that isn't going to sting as bad as um, Trey heading out. Um, uh, thanks for tapping in, Trey, and thanks for joining in on the discussion through the comments. I always enjoy that. Um, but you know, Giannis out. He's an MVP caliber player. That's going to really hurt that team. Hero will hurt too as well. But you still have Jimmy Butler, who is the number one player on that team, and he played like playoff Jimmy. And if playoff Jimmy plays like playoff Jimmy, 4 games in a 7-game series, they're going to have a chance. Um, this Heat team not nearly as good as they were last year or in the past. But if Giannis is hurt and can't play, or hurt and can't play at a high level, Jimmy Butler may just do it again and may will them past the first series, or past the first series at least.
Yep. Um, James, I just got an alert. Bryce Young looks like he's going to the Panthers right now. He has just canceled all of his pre-draft visits with any other NFL team. I got that from Bleacher Report. So I don't want to kind of stir us off into out of the NBA, but Bryce Young has just canceled his pre-draft visits, so
Good
he
call.
could
Good
be a
call.
Carolina Panther.
Um, I say we finish up the NFL playoffs and then we circle back to that here at the end because I think we'll have a couple extra minutes.
Mhm.
So because I've got a take on that. But since we're in the heat of the NBA stuff, let's finish that off and then we'll circle over to Bryce Young. Good catch though, good catch because that did just come in literally 1 minute ago.
Yep.
But pretty good breaking news there. Do you have anything you want to throw in on the Heat and Bucks while we're still on the topic?
I mean, I think the biggest thing is if Giannis is out, how is the Brook Lopez versus Bam Adebayo matchup going to be? Because I know Brook Lopez has been a very good defensive player this season, possibly a depoy, but I kind of like that Bam versus Brook Lopez matchup and Jimmy and Chris Middleton on the wing. I think that's going to be kind of the story of the series. If they're both out, we obviously know Hero's out, but if Giannis is back, I think the Bucks will definitely take the series again, and possibly I think this game, the series could go to 7 if Giannis is back.
Hmm. Yeah, it's going to be a tough series for him. I'm with you. And it'll all come down to the health of Giannis, I think. Moving on, Nets Sixers. This game was competitive at times. It ended up not being competitive. I like this Nets team. I like Mikal Bridges. He was one of the, that's one of the if you're giving up KD, there is really not much that you can do to get back an equal amount in return. Just because KD is so good, you got to
Mhm.
get a haul of draft picks. With that said, Mikal Bridges is doing his best to make this at least an even trade because he played great. He's been playing great. And with that said, he can't be the only guy. I just pulled up the box score. He can't be the only guy with more than 20.
Mm-mm.
You've got Cam Johnson 18, Spencer Dinwiddie 14, Seth Curry 10. That's not good. That's
Mm-mm.
not good. You not only do not have you only have one guy hitting 20, you don't even have 5 guys hitting 10. That's
Yeah.
bad. That's really bad.
Hmm. And in that sense, why don't you play Cam Thomas? I'm sorry. If there's not another guy getting over 20 points, we have seen it through this entire year that Cam Thomas can score the damn ball. He played 4 minutes yet, like last game.
Hmm.
put him into the starting lineup for God's sake. Take Din Shitty out. I'm sorry. Like, I know, shout out Kyle Kuzma for that tweet, but it's such a good tweet. Like, he's just not a starting caliber point guard. Get Thomas starting, have him get hot. If not, take Dinwiddie off the bench. I
Hmm.
think it's simple as that. And
Yeah,
have
and yeah, I'm with you. And the thing is I get the hesitancy with Cam Thomas because he can have great games that they lose, and he can get cold. But
Mhm.
you are you going to win the series without him? If the answer to that question is no, then there's no reason to not try with him, right?
Exactly.
Sometimes you got to bring out the risky card. You
Mhm.
can't play it safe if you're going to lose anyways.
Exactly. I mean, I feel like you gotta like if you're the Nets, you gotta live by the three and die by the three. Johnson can shoot, Bridges can shoot, Cam Thomas can shoot for God's sake, and
Mhm,
even Joe Harris and Seth Curry. If you're not gonna win the series, coming into paper, you're gonna get swept by the Sixers. Sixers are a very good team, and I feel like they've struggled to defend the three this season. So why not do that? I just don't get it. And I feel like if I was like the Nets head coach, I can't think of who it is right now, but put Thomas in. You have nothing to lose. You've
mhm,
done all this to trade away Durant and Kyrie, and you still have a chance for a playoff spot. And you play the Sixers. Why not do that? That
mhm.
doesn't make any sense to me.
And there was a clip from Vaughn, their head coach, where they asked him about Cam Thomas and him and Cam scoring a lot and them losing. And he basically said like, yeah, he's got to figure out how we can still win games while he's playing like that. And everyone was like, no, that's your job. That's
Yeah,
your job as the coach to
that's your
figure out
job.
how you can utilize him the best, have him score, and you come out with a win. That's not
Mhm.
Cam Thomas's job. His
No.
Cam Thomas is going to score the ball. You
Oh
got to
yeah,
figure out the pieces around that.
exactly.
And if you've got four guys scoring more than 10 points and Cam Thomas plays 4 minutes, I see a problem and I see a potential solution. Let's see if
Yeah,
let's see if they give it a run. Um,
exactly.
but the Sixers look good. Harden had a nice game. Embiid obviously played well. Tobias Harris putting up 21.
Mhm.
Anytime he can get that number, you're in a rough spot. I'll be interested to see with the Sixers because I haven't really been able to pinpoint how good they are. That's a team I've struggled with personally. I'm interested to see if they could potentially take out a 1 or 2 seed here. But they look good, and I think they can get through Brooklyn and maybe win another game. We'll have to wait and see. But it's a team I've struggled on, but they look good against the Nets.
Yep.
And then what do we have? One more game here in the East, I believe, or was that the last one?
That was the last one because we
That was
did.
the last one.
Yeah.
All right. Now NFL draft. Bryce Young going first overall. It appears allegedly, whichever other qualifiers you want to throw on there to make it not official yet. But I do like this. I do like this from the Panthers because I think Bryce Young is the best player. I'm concerned about his height, or excuse me, the best quarterback. I'm
Mhm.
concerned about his height. I think that's a real issue. But I do the things that he was doing at Alabama amazed me. Right, there were times where I would turn on an Alabama game, right? I like seeing Alabama lose. Let's put that out there.
Oh yeah.
But I would turn on an Alabama game and go, "Oh, Alabama's going to lose. Here we go." Um, and you would see Bryce Young manage a comeback. He would absolutely tear the heart out of anyone who was rooting against Alabama. And I think that in itself, that clutch ability, the ability to make plays out of the pocket, the ability to scramble and not just for yards with his feet, but scramble and still find guys open downfield. And that's before you even get into any combine or film or anything else. But I think just that clutch ability has always set him apart for me. His ability to do things in the fourth quarter when he should not be making plays, when the O line isn't protecting him. He is making plays when they need to be made, and that's something that I've always thought very highly of when it comes to Bryce Young. And if I were the Panthers sitting at one, I'd take him first overall. So I think the Panthers are making a good move here.
Yeah, I agree. And I know it's not official, obviously, but I feel like I have to agree with everything you said. Bryce Young is the clear-cut favorite over just any other QB right now. I know Stroud is kind of the 1B with Young, but obviously Stroud doesn't have that kind of scrambling ability to get out of the pocket and just get precise passes in there. He can run a little bit, but not as well as Bryce Young.
Hmm.
But I think smart move by the Panthers, and it's going to be good to see him in Carolina. Not
Yeah.
official yet, though.
Yeah, not official. Bryce Young's or excuse me, CJ Stroud's a tricky player to kind of analyze too, just because he played so well against Georgia.
Hmm.
And like all the things that you were like, hey, I wish CJ Stroud would do this. Like, I wish he'd scramble a little bit more. I wish he would play a little bit better in clutch moments. All these things that you wish CJ Stroud would do, he did against Georgia, the best team in the country. So
Hmm.
it really put scouts in a pickle. Um, but and then he played really well at the combine too. Arm looked great at the combine. And so it really put a lot of scouts and a lot of teams in a pickle trying to decide, do I take kind of the catalog of Bryce Young and risk the height issues, or do I take CJ Stroud, who I, I not to say that he's more of a wild card, because he's not a wild card in the sense of Anthony Richardson or Will Levis, who have obvious concerns, but there's concerns with Stroud over, do you get the Stroud that played against Georgia? Is that something that we get week in and week out? Is that something we have to work towards? Or are we getting, CJ Stroud against Northwestern? Are we getting CJ Stroud against Michigan? There's some games where CJ Stroud in clutch time didn't play as well, or in big games that he didn't play as well as he needed to. Um, and he's always had a great O line in front of him and a great receiving core that has made it easy for him. So what happens when the receivers aren't Marvin Harrison Jr. and Jackson Smith and Jigba and Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave? What happens when, he could honestly go to a team with a worse receiving core than what he was playing with in college and
Hmm.
have that be at an NFL level? So that's a concern in itself as well. So I would take Bryce Young. And the other thing here that really interests me is, what do the Texans do now? Because it sounds like the Texans have always been high on Bryce Young,
Hmm.
and there's questions whether they're willing to take CJ Stroud at 2, because CJ Stroud has the same agent as Deshaun Watson. So now there's issues as to whether they're willing to take Watson at 2. So I think that could create kind of a domino effect, which, or excuse me, take Stroud at 2. But that could create a domino effect, and I'd probably take Stroud at 2 if I were them. But I get why they'd be hesitant if they have a bad relationship with the agent, and you want someone to be your franchise quarterback at pick 2. What happens when his rookie deal's up? Are they willing to come back? So I could understand why they'd be hesitant, but I think it creates a weird domino.
Yeah, I agree. I think if I were the Texans and I feel like on draft night, if Panthers call, we be like, yo, you want Bryce Young? Just give him like whatever you want. I would say no. I'd say don't take Bryce Young. You pass on Stroud and you trade down. I think if you gather the assets this year and you take guys like, I don't know, Jackson Smith and Jigba, Jordan Addison, get like a quarterback weapons, get him Paris Johnson Jr., Skronsky, just any O lineman. Like Texans have already built their defense, already got Derek Stingley and some other pieces. But I feel like right now the concern is receivers and weapons, and you already have a good tight end, Schultz and Damian Pierce.
Hmm.
I think right now you load up on kind of the big boys. You get D linemen, O linemen, and you get receivers because this receiver class is very good. I feel like if you get the top 2, top 3 slash Zay Flowers, I think you're set, and I think you're good for a long time. And you tank and take Caleb Williams. I feel like that kind of brings in a little bit like more leverage for the Texans right now because everyone wants Stroud and Young. So I mean, outside of Richardson and Levis, like they're obviously not the best, but um, Young and Stroud are obviously the 2 best. But I think you gotta just tank and try and shoot for Williams next year.
Yeah, I think that's interesting because it's also a question of who can you get to trade up with you.
Hmm.
Um, I'm interested to see what the Colts would do at 4. Right, the Colts have always been in an interesting trade up position because there's the there for the Colts. It's always, can we sit here and take the quarterback we want at 4? That's always been a discussion. It's always been something that they've had to consider when talking about trading up. Do you get Vegas decide, hey, we want to move up from 7? Do the Titans want to move up from 11? The Titans were apparently interested in number 1. And if the number 1 quarterback on their board is CJ Stroud, then I assume they still want to move up to 2, assuming Bryce Young goes 1.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think it's interesting, and I'd like to see them get a right tackle, right? And the Texans have pick 12 too. So they can do a lot of work there in that first round in terms of trading down and gathering assets. I'd like to see them leave if that's the game plan. If they're not taking a quarterback, which I understand why they wouldn't, I'd like to see them leave the first round with a right tackle. You've already got Laramie Tunsil, who's on your left side. So if you can get another tackle and you can get a quarterback next year, you're now looking at someone who has 2 franchise level tackles in front of them. Maybe you can build, if you can trade back enough, maybe you can get No Sirens Torrance or fall back a little bit later and get some of those other good interior offensive linemen, get a receiver. What if you can trade back a couple spots and really start to add talent on that offense and gather picks for next year? I think that is a really good idea. I do agree with you on that. And even if you're not getting Williams, you then have to think about what happens then, because there are other good quarterbacks coming out next year. It's not just Williams.
Mm-hmm.
Drake May looks to be a good prospect. Obviously, you want to see how those guys play this year. Someone like Will Levis was supposed to be really good this year and then didn't have the final season that was expected. So there will be some concerns with that and some issues. But if you're trading with a team like the Titans, the Titans then next year can't make the move for Williams. So you're also kind of taking another team out of play for Caleb Williams. So I agree with you. I do think that makes sense if they don't want to take Stroud. I see why they'd want to take him, but if they're concerned about the agent and don't want Stroud, go ahead, collect the picks, try and make that offense a little bit better. Maybe add a couple pieces on defense and get ready for a rookie next year. I don't hate it.
Yeah. I mean, like you said, just with Williams and Drake May, I feel like next year's quarterback class is a little deeper than this year's, especially. And even with guys like Schroeder Sanders, Jaden Daniels, Quinn Ewers is available next year too if he wants to declare. Spencer Rattler, Michael Pratt, and Cameron Ward from Wash U. But all those guys, I feel like it's a lot deeper and a lot of kind of boomer bust. But I mean, if you don't get Williams, might as well get Quinn Ewers if he declares. So I think that'll be kind of a good pick. He's got a good size, great arm. So, and I think he's going to do a lot of good things at Texas this year. So I would love the Texans to trade down if they can.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see how that QB class next year shapes out. I think it'll probably end up Williams, May 1 and 2, but 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. It's going to be interesting to see how it shapes up. Guys like Joe Milton, JJ McCarthy, and Joe Milton. Not as bullish on Joe Milton, but he does have a rocket for an arm, and I bet a team will fall in love with him and be willing to take the risk on him. JJ McCarthy, rocket for an arm, good legs, has some issues he needs to work out as well. Those are 2 guys that I know a decent amount about just because I'm a big Michigan fan, so I'm tapped in there. But those will be guys that teams really like. Quinn Ewers, like you said, Sanders, I think will be a really interesting prospect. I'm interested to see how he plays at Colorado this year. So there will be a handful of guys that it's not just like, I'm sure, out of the guys you listed and some other guys, there'll be 1 or 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 guys that don't pan out or play well next year and don't shoot up boards. But I do think there'll be a couple that do, and you get to a strong 3 to 4 to 5 QB class maybe. And depending on how the quarterback position shakes out, maybe there's a couple teams that don't need one. It'll be interesting to see how the QBs look next year. It's always hard to forecast who will be interested and who plays well, but I do think for the Texans looking a year away, it would make a level of sense to trade down and try and play the board next year.
Yep.
And we're at an hour. We are at an hour. So, Griffin, do you have anything that you want to throw out there before we wrap up the stream today? If not, I'm all good, and we can call it.
I'm good today.
All right. Tomorrow, we got the Tuesday show. Um, Changes every day, obviously, but maybe we'll have Bag Donuts and Hannah Fan. They're usually the Tuesday crew, but I don't like to say they're coming on for sure because I don't know that for sure. But regardless, someone will be here on Tuesday, and I imagine there will be probably a lot more NBA playoff talk. And maybe some predictions for the remainder of the series and the upcoming games. So make sure you tune in tomorrow for that. But for today, we are out, and thank you for joining us.